Oh, there you go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Daily AI Show. Today is Wednesday, August 16th, and we are talking about the dark side of free AI, jailbreaking, and safety concerns. Thank you for joining us. So what is jailbreaking? I guess if you are anyone in the planet that's heard of, I mean, if you use a technical device, you know what jailbreaking is, I think. It's basically when you can try to find exploits in areas of software, hardware. Specifically, we're talking about AI in today's call, and trying to find things that can sidestep the original intent of the authors of the software, right? I guess is one way of putting it. And that same token, that same topic is red teaming. Red teaming is when an internal team for OpenAI, their own people, they try to adversarially challenge their model, is what they call it. So both are designed to find problems or holes or opportunities, but I think that the jailbreaking community has a different intent, and some would say, depending on what they are, their motives are, which is something I'd like to get into. You know, some jailbreaking teams like Jailbreak Chat is a community of jailbreakers with the intent is to sidestep what the safety and trust layer, the trust and safety layers of different models, because they feel like it's a little bit overreaching, right? So anybody wants to jump in and talk about what they've seen in the news or seen in their own uses of jailbreaking?
Sure, I'll take a run at it. So first things first, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with the term, jailbreaking, from my recollection, jailbreaking goes back to topics of conversation around iPhones, where years ago there was a way to break Apple's hold over your iPhone and do what you wanted with it, and I'm sure it applied to the Android phone as well. So that was an early stage, but jailbreaking, in particular respect to tools like OpenAI, for example, and ChatGPT, it really comes down more to sidestepping the safety guidelines that the programmers who build those types of tools are putting in there. So they don't want their tool posting crude, smart, really bad, racist comments, all that kind of stuff. And there's plenty of people in the world who would quite happily have those kind of conversations with an AI. People like OpenAI are basically trying to protect the public from that sort of stuff by building in some guardrails. Jailbreaking comes about where people are either, I would suspect, accidentally in the first cases, but they're basically trying to break that protection by kind of tricking it. There's multiple ways you can do it. I'm not the tech expert as far as the programming side of it goes, where you can inject code into it. But I think one of the first ones I ran across was called Dan, or Do Anything Now, or something like that. Some bright spark came up with the idea from some dude from Reddit, I think it was, with no surprise there, came up with the idea that by telling ChatGPT that to pretend to be someone else called Dan, and you can do anything, it would trick it into saying things that it shouldn't do, and it sort of escalated from there. And the AI people are now doing their best to stay ahead of it, but like all these things, it's an arms race. If it involves technology, someone's going to figure out how to hack it or break it or do something bad with it eventually. And I think the biggest concern from companies like OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, those guys, is more around the bad things that can come out for their brand online. So that's more their concern. If somebody starts using ChatGPT to post a whole pile of anti-Semitic stuff, then that's not good. Same for Midjourney creating porn, for example. I mean, in theory, it should be able to do it, but they don't want that. So they've got all these sort of limitations in there. But there is and probably will be people who are trying to break that. So maybe that's an introduction for you guys to leap into, because I'm not really a huge expert on anything beyond that, but hopefully that helps people watching.
One of the key things that got me thinking about while Aaron was talking was a lot of businesses right now are not only using tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Bard in some cases, but I think like using that API and starting to build some of the applications around it. whether it's chatbots or operational tools. And the issue is what happens when, they release products that are jailbroken, like, and then how, like, what are their, like, one of the things that got me thinking about this was because, we were looking at AI operating principles, ethics, security for our company. And I think the one question I had is what happens if there are risks, like we implement some sort of use, some sort of product integration, and that's jailbroken, and then it impacts the business, and we're relying on companies like OpenAI or Google to run some of these products and super integrated. What are the ramifications of that, and what are the potential solutions? And because this is so early days, there isn't a like a solution or a Reddit thread on how to fix that.
That's a lot to dip into, in my opinion, Carl. I don't know where to go with that. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, what is the alternative, right?
Right.
I mean, so one of the alternatives is we're not doing AI, which seems like not going to be a successful long-term strategy. Another alternative, I think, is we'll just do our own AI. And frankly, I think using OpenAI or Google's, like, they have more resources to be able to counter the thing. I'm curious about Claude's AI, right? It seems like the constitutional AI backing did better in all of these tests.
Mm-hmm. And I want to jump on that one too, Beth. So what we've seen from the different jailbreaking efforts is that obviously the role play one, the Dan is no longer works for the most part. And the newest one was what's called token smuggling, which basically you're hiding instructions inside of the code and you're saying, help me with this code. And by the way, give me an example output of this code. And that was like a really weird way of tricking the AI or the chat to do that. And what's interesting is all of them failed that except for Anthropic with Claude. I thought that was interesting. So the constitutional AI, how that operates is basically, it's like the four laws of robotics or whatever. I'm not exactly sure how they've embedded it in the model, but it's not a RLHF. It's not the same as the other models. It's not the after the fact, the fine tuning that ChatGPT does. So maybe there's something to be said about how they've structured their model, to be frank. And so to your point, Beth, that one might be a little bit not unbreakable, but unbreakable with what works for other companies, other models. I did want to address Will's question, so go ahead and jump in, Andy, but I want to address one of our viewers' questions whenever you have done with your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to just say that to Carl's point about the foundation model and what it knows and how company data, which you don't want to have exposed to the general internet, might leak through the foundation model. Architecturally, typically there is a separation between the foundation model and everything that it's been trained on and corporate data that's kept in a separate database, but the LLM has access to that database. So there is a kind of a possibility of a firewall there that is possibly used just in the prompt. You could give it instructions as a base prompt that if you don't find the information in here, don't use any of the information that you have access to. And just as an interesting side point, nobody knows what the foundation models really know. These deep neural networks, they're not explainable is the term. They can't be examined and say, okay, they gave this answer, whether it's BARD or OpenAI's models, they gave this answer because this was the data that was there. It's so enormous, there's no way to trace it.
Yeah, you couldn't literally take all of human knowledge that's gone into OpenAI and shove it into a person's brain. We couldn't do that. Wouldn't have the time or the capacity for it. So I think you're spot on, Andy. a lot of the time we're just keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that things don't go bad.
Jimmy,
what do you-
what were you
let's-
thinking?
Yeah,
Let's go back
was
to Will's question if we could. Sorry to cut
Okay.
you. I want to make sure we answer that before it gets lost. So he's talking about the truth score of ChatGPT early days. That was something that was measured, and he actually mentions that's not really something you hear about anymore. What does everybody know about the truth score and where it went?
Nothing.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. All right.
Yeah, tell us, Will. One of the
Well, but I
things that-
can.
Go ahead, Beth.
Sorry, I can't say that the trust layer is something that is core to Salesforce, has been core to Salesforce the whole time, because it's a cloud-based SaaS, right? And that is part of why they're rolling it out in the relatively moderate pace that they are, because trust is such a big factor. But also people store stuff in AWS or Google's stuff, right? I mean, the access to data is not a new AI thing.
Okay,
Right.
let me just read a sentence from Will's question, which is good. There is apparently a truth score for every user in their learning algorithm. Now, what that implies to me is that, of course, the purveyors of these large language models are collecting lots of information from every query that's put in the form of a prompt or question by every user. And they have the opportunity to train further on some of those questions, although they don't automatically train the model on everything that everybody asks. So it sounds to me, and I've never heard of the truth score before, but it sounds to me like before they use information that's uploaded or put into a prompt as part of ongoing continuous learning training, they evaluate it for its validity for training purposes. And that would be assigning a truth score. And pretty much over time, they would say, this person puts a bunch of noxious stuff in here, so we're not going to include that in our efforts to train at all.
Right. And
That's
honestly,
brand news to me when I was trying to get it to teach me how to make a bomb today, just as a trial run. I might have just screwed myself.
So I just heard this on a podcast I was listening to, and they said that when the red teams are red teaming their own GPT-4, it knew, oh, you're just trying to test me, and it wouldn't play the reindeer games. So exactly what you just said, the version of reindeer games is truth score. And I think it's really interesting that Will brought that up, because it's something that we're not going to hear about. They're not going to talk about. It's going to be something that's hidden. And you're, as a user, you're like, okay, this is a nefarious user. They're trying to get me to do something that I'm not programmed to do. I'm not going to play that game. And so the red teams had a hard time actually jailbreaking it, or actually finding holes, because it was the truth score is probably the reason why, which I thought was interesting. So
I think that goes back to answering your question, Carl. Is so essentially what can businesses do, and that's essentially applying security protocols. We just need to apply it for AI. So whether this means we need a more focus on cybersecurity or AI security, I'll let people talk about that. But essentially, the three basic things that I found on this really interesting blog about AI security is awareness and assess the risks, then implement robust security measures. And that includes assessment and testing and things like that. And then do AI hardening, where you're constantly red teaming and going through your security testing before you release your product. I mean, that's just like any software now, right? Beth, like you're saying, that trust layer for Salesforce. So I don't think this is anything new in those terms. We are just seeing, because of the popularity of AI, and it's been such a huge, impact, that all of these security type questions are coming to the forefront. But I say we just need to apply our normal security or modified security measures to make sure that these new products that are coming out are more secure. And Aaron's right; it is a security. It is a arms race. It's not a, oh, we figured it out and we don't have to worry about it anymore. It requires constant testing.
Yeah,
Okay, so
it's
time
like
for
Microsoft. There's people trying to hack Windows and have been since version 1, and they're never going to stop. So the AI guys and gals are going to have the same problem. They're just going to have to keep dealing with it. And what I think at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know is going to happen. So,
Yeah.
and Will's popped another comment in, by the way.
Yeah, he gave some more clarity. I do want to do Robert's pushback. I guess I want to do my hot take. The pushback. All right, so
That's a new sequence.
I'll tell you, I don't like trust and safety layers. I don't trust the people that create the trust and safety layers. So I feel like they are imposing their own bias in an effort to be the non-bias, which is actually ironic, right? They have their own motives, agenda, and they work in an omniculture tech company more than likely. And unfortunately, by putting those trust and safety layers in, this push to protect whatever group from being marginalized in an output from ChatGPT, quite frankly, that's the world we live in. So what are you going to do? You're going to create a commune of responses that are based on whatever your programmers deem to be safe. And I don't like that. So unfortunately, or fortunately for us, the jailbreakers are out there to bypass those people's inputs. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, to play devil's advocate on that, though, right? And that kind of led me to another point I wanted to make in terms of open source versus, tools like, using OpenAI or Anthropic. It's you can look at it from another sense where, like, if everything is open, then would it be better to have at least a major company that can deal with these jailbreaks versus open source where it's open like Llama and away everybody goes, and it's a free for all. So I would say you could look at it from both sides.
I'm more on the side of the open source side of things. I think to what Robert was saying is you don't want to hinder the development or evolution of the technology by putting it into little boxes or whatnot. But I think there's still that responsibility for the testing. Now with open source, its major benefit is that you have all of these independent testers, all these independent programmers and developers who are applying their own ideas, their own point of views and things like that. And you'll get a more robust and stable system out of it because you just have so much more testing going on than what any one company could do, which is going to have their own biases built in. If Google's doing it, it's going to have its own biases.
And so, okay, sorry, finish your thought.
So just to wrap it up, I think having the open source so that it is, or using the jailbreakers and whatnot, so that we have access to that, well, lack of a better term, raw LLM access, but we still need to apply our ethics and security to it. But I think that might just be done on the individual business side. That might be more overhead for them, but I think that's the responsibility of any business that's going to implement LLMs.
Yeah, and on the far extreme, you're eventually gonna have the Nazi LLM, right? It's gonna obey exactly the way they feel, and you're gonna have hopefully one in the middle that's like, okay, society deems this to be pretty much representative. I don't know where that is on the models today. Maybe Claude, maybe, I don't know, but I do think that most companies are going to, larger, of course, Coke or large IBM, they're going to have their own language models trained and operate on their mission, vision, and values of the company and the culture of their company and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but right now, we're stuck using models that are dictated, their safety layers by other people, which is also the more controls you put on it, the more you cannot predict its behavior. And that's why they're saying they're getting dumber, which I'm not sure if I believe that or not, but that's one comment out there.
Can I jump in now?
Yeah, please go for it.
So I guess the thing I want to say, I like my perspective is, how does this impact the end user? Okay, we're all talking fairly high level in some respects here, and a lot of this is all pretty esoteric and a bit big picture stuff. But the guy or girl that runs a small business and wants to use AI tools, how's this going to impact them? And I think in a lot of areas, it's not really going to be a major issue. If someone gets ChatGPT to say something horrible to you, that's not the worst thing that could ever happen. But the one thing I would caution people using these tools is just be careful about putting your confidential data into these platforms, because that's where you run the risk that some of that information could end up in the whole LLM and pop out somewhere where you don't want it or don't expect it. So that's probably, for the average, as we would say in Australia, for the average punter, you just be careful what you put into it rather than worry about whether it's going to say anything horrible to you. So yeah, that's my thought.
I think for the audience, what applies to businesses right now, what's coming out of jailbreaking and what's coming out of these malicious forms of LLMs or malicious forms of chat, like Worm GPT and Evil GPT, is right now on the malicious side of things, the attacks are pretty much, the criminals haven't changed their methods. They're with what they're enabled with these open LLMs right now is just doing it more efficiently, right? Making the phishing emails sound more real or more legit. And so right now, I think on business side, no matter what scale that you're at, you just have to worry about business email compromise, or BEC, and that's essentially training and this goes back to that AI awareness thing, just training your employees to be more skilled at recognizing what is a fake email, what is a phishing email or a scamming email. And now that's just a little more difficult because these LLMs help random criminals perform their malicious acts a little easier.
Yeah, but there's also an AI for that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the idea would be for a major corporation that wanted to maintain security for their proprietary data, you would I think I'm assuming here that inside their AI engineering team, they would be saying, okay, let's mount a full deep neural network here that's been trained purely to determine whether some output that could be expressed by these other LLMs that are accessible by the public or by partner networks, and et cetera, whether any of that contains proprietary data, and put a little bit of a pause in there to evaluate that, and maybe even require human approval of the release of that information if it does contain anything that is protected.
Well, see, I think that's where the tricky part is because the downfall for any of these schemes is the human element, right?
I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, it's social engineering which really pokes the security holes. That's people being convinced to send money, or right. People convinced to just release one bit of internal data, right? Whether that be a password, a username, an account number, or anything along those lines. I remember, not as sophisticated, but I remember for a company I used to work for, we got emails on the pretty regular about, oh, hey, I'm the CEO. I need you to buy me an Amazon gift card and then send me the code scratched off of the back. And, those are pretty evident, but this is what I'm talking about is all you need is someone to go, oh, I got to take care of that right now. My boss is telling me to go do this. And that's where it breaks down. So that's where that focus on AI awareness or security awareness comes in, because the email compromise is the number one, business security hole.
Right.
I think that I agree with that. And I mean, I'm relatively tech savvy, and I have been caught once or twice by emails that I thought were legit. I think the bigger problem there is more going to be along the lines of an employee that gets pissed off with someone or something at the company and does something malicious. It's one thing to have someone make a mistake or not realize that the email that came in was fake, but it's another thing to have somebody who's just been fired by their boss or just given a ripping off, and they just say, right, screw you, I'm just releasing all your information into the ether. And that's where we have much more serious issues.
Right.
Because
AI is an onboarding sequence or offboarding sequence to take care of.
We're kind of teaching them how to beat the system in a way. So Yeah.
Because the key, what AI really does is it amplifies human abilities right now, right? And
including the bad stuff.
And its ability to amplify human abilities. Well, the amplification is increasing, and its ability to continue to amplify in different ways is increasing exponentially as well, right? So this isn't a new problem. Bad actors, because you fired somebody, is not a new thing. What's new is the scope at which someone can do it and the speed at which that changes.
Well, I think when you're looking at companies' security operations teams right now, this would be a very high on their list, and I just don't know how they would actually deal with with this, because think about, if you look at it, any typical SaaS companies or any typical company at all that has, they use every division, every department uses a whole bunch of tools, right? A bunch of SaaS tools to help them with their business. Imagine every single one of those tools implementing an AI feature into them that some companies trying to just get on the bandwagon as fast as they can without, really high level security thinking in the product, versus some that do. But imagine them having to think about that, and on top of wanting the company, with the balance of wanting the company to be more open to try new AI tools, to get their employees to actually, encourage them to use it. So there's that balance there where, like, we want to be open, but we also need to be able to test all these new applications, but there isn't, like, a history or knowledge of how to test them, because this is all new and it's coming so fast. I just don't. I kind of feel sorry for some of our.
I see where you're going with it, but my thinking is that this is jailbreaking and the nefarious actors. So when you're using a tool, then you're actually on the opposite end of the spectrum. You're at the end of the spectrum that's too protected. It's like, you're given a gun with no bullets, and because they made it too safe, right, to go to war or something. So I guess I'm saying is, when you have companies that are implementing AI, they don't have to worry about the holes that the jailbreakers are finding, because that's not a problem for them, because they're using the tool as it's presented. So I guess if everybody's kind of changing the thought process in this conversation about how do we, look the safety concerns of nefarious actors who are using AI in the organization, and it somehow breaking on us, then that's something different. Is that what you're kind of getting, Carl?
Well, no, it was more about, like, if it kind of goes back to my first point where, yes, we want people to use it, but then as companies start building things on top of things, and then they're putting it out into the wild, and then people are jailbreaking that. On top of it, right?
Let me just use Salesforce as an example, and Beth, you might follow on this. But when Salesforce first came out, there was a lot of resistance about putting our important sales prospecting information out on a cloud server. And so, let's stick with Siebel, because it's all on our servers and we can protect that with firewalls. So, Carl, to your point, once you have your stuff out there with Salesforce, you're somewhat reliant on Salesforce not being jailbroken and providing access somehow through their AI implementation. And that requires a really high level of security protocol within Salesforce.
And Salesforce has been working on that for a really long time, right? Trust layer is like core thing, and they've been implementing AI for a really long time, right? Like the generative AI stuff is new, but the analytical AI stuff, it has been available for, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years.
So I think that's the big take today, Carl. I think you made it. I'm sorry it took me so long to get there, but the idea that companies who are using APIs for tools that are jailbreakable, like you implemented something and it's a really complex, use of APIs with OpenAI, and then all of a sudden it comes to find out that one little string of characters can completely give access to the back end of the data that you've housed. Then now all the stuff you've trained that post-trained that model on in your company, now somebody can have access to that. That can get dangerous. So that's important. So what does that mean to this topic? It means that we want those jailbreakers to find those holes so they can fix them. So that's good. We want the red teams to be better at, I guess is my thinking, but it also makes people who are in companies now trying to implement products right now maybe a little more cautious. It's kind of your point. It's like, let's not jump off the boat or jump into this water so quickly, because there's a potential that there might be some jailbreaking of these new tools because they haven't been tested yet. Is that your thinking?
Well, it's more of like, so for people like us, we definitely want to try the tools and use it, but I can see, and it depends on the industry too, right? I can see certain companies, like their SecOp teams are just like, wait a minute, the potential risk for their business or their clients is too high, versus another company which, that's no problems. The risk is lower, so we can implement it faster, or we can implement it versus, not implementing at all. It's an interesting balance right now of where people are, just because in Mike's, in my, I guess in my case, implementing chatbots to companies. And I always tell them, hey, just to let you know, you are one of the leading edge people using this. So, and being part of that, that's cool, but there's also risks to it. And there's also, you're going to face all the issues that come with being that pioneer, because frankly, we don't know which of some of these AI tools and new AI companies, which is going to last, which is going to be here, which isn't going to be here in the next 3-6 months because they've been overtaken by somebody else. So it was just more of an observation, a point to make, not necessarily we shouldn't do it, but it's more of like, it's an interesting time for different companies and how they look at it.
Yeah,
on that
Laura,
note,
I think you just sold the AI
comment,
security market.
Two at once.
Sorry, say that one more time, Jimmy.
I was just saying that Carl just explained the best sales technique for AI security market.
There you go. So now we should all apply for jobs there. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. We're at the end of our 30 minutes. So thank you for listening, people. And we'll check us out tomorrow, where the topic will be
Midjourney,
future, beyond.
Yeah.
And
Pretty
of course,
pictures. Pretty pictures.
Bring your pictures.
One of
Bring
my
your best
favorite
pictures. All right.
Bye.
Stay on.
See you later.
Do I end it?